Hi there, everybody. My name is Kate, and welcome to my channel, Fire Horse Academy. So, I want to talk to you today. There's a lot of energetic stuff happening. However, truth is timeless. So, this is a timeless message. However, it's super relevant right now because we are currently in the very beginnings of June 2026. We've had a lot of action, period, in the last few days. However, it seems to be supercharged, and it's been super duper blue moon charged with yesterday's or Sunday's full moon, a micro blue moon, which was really intense, very good, very up, very down. However, in my experience, and I know all weekend long, the people that I work with and my friends, we were really, feeling the pinch, going away and getting into our little worlds and, hours at a time. And, then coming back out and going, oh, hey, yeah, I got your text, thanks. And like, you all right? Yeah. It's been quite strange to assimilate new energies. There's many of us that are going through upgrades. Many of us that are going through downgrades, many of us are experiencing, some real shifts because the split continues to happen in the timelines. The wheat and the chaff continue to separate. Those people who are going to go towards the light and those people who are not. Those people who choose to stay in service to self versus being in service to others. There's a very clear distinction that is allowing itself to be set up quite naturally because it is being set up quite naturally. It's just that it's violent and very ugly to look at and see. However, it is what we've been setting up since the beginning of my understanding of humanity. And this is going to fly in the face of a lot of people's, very specific stories. However, this narrows down to a specific story understanding as well. However, it's the one that fits for me, and it's the one that I'm explaining this divine masculine and divine feminine energy through and in. So, and why this conflict is happening right now, and why you see the entire system coming down of the old age. The old age is based in masculine domination, masculine energy, embodied in men or women. It really makes no difference. And so when you're in the age of Pisces, where it's about domination, control, and, earth stuff, and we make, that our most important thing, masculine energy is the doer of the pair. It is the doer. It is literally the implanter of the seed. It is that the tool for action, so to speak. And divine feminine is the reception. She's the, nurture and the grow. She's the darkness, if you will, the void, the womb, where that grows. However, when that is birthed through this process into the light, the man and woman, the masculine and feminine, see the culmination of whatever they've birthed together. It's just that, unfortunately, with understanding that the void or the universe, God, etc., understanding that as the void also could be understood as the dark night of the soul, because that's where you have to journey into to find where to implant the seed to grow the thing that will come out here and be in the light one day. However, you have to be willing to, grow in the dark a whole lot. And that's a feminine attribute that lives in both men and women, and however else you may identify out here in your identity or your sexuality. I'm speaking of neither, because we all have masculine and feminine traits within us, and we all carry with those traits masculine and feminine energy. And when we are in the positive aspects of them, we behave a certain way. When we behave in the negative aspects of them, we behave in a very toxic and karmic way, depending on how nasty and ugly it gets. The more positive, the more high vibing, self service to others instead of service to self, etc. Those are the separating factors between the vibrational fields of what we're doing over here and what we're doing over here. And when you marry those up together in a healthy way, you have the divine masculine and the divine feminine coming together to create the baby, to create the next version of life, to create the next cycle. It depends on what layer of this you're looking at. But at the very fundamental level, deep within each of us if we only consider ourselves, and I highly suggest that we start there, that thinking of divine masculine and divine feminine in here means that we are inseminating our own consciousness, our own void. We are the void, and we allow that to be seeded by our masculine energy. The void is our feminine. We receive that into the womb, that into the womb of us, and we allow that masculine to drop the seed of information for us to go and allow the body, the female energy, to surround that seed of information, that pocket of the universe that has been stored right here. It allows that to be totally encased and put into a beautiful little growing bubble. And in spirit, that's the way it would grow in the quantum field as well. It grows in the collective conscious, it grows and it grows and grows in the collective consciousness until it has become an entire consciousness. And so masculine energy, male energy, through a very masculine paradigm of control and domination, we made long ago in that void space. This is the story. It's the one that makes most sense to me. However, choose to believe or don't believe. However, this is what makes most sense to me, is that if feminine energy is the void and masculine energy is the, is the action, then the way to move through this system is to understand that where we come from is a void. We were birthed here. And we need the action of going back into that birthing process to see where we have come out with some things that we don't like, some mutations perhaps, or some anomalies, some things in our structure, some things in our DNA, that we as growing and evolving beings who can eternally, reach into the womb of ourselves and regrow new parts, despite how we identify out here, it makes no difference. If we're utilizing our feminine energy, then we're continuing to grow and birth new ideas from within us, and it's the masculine energy that will be out here doing. However, the level of integrity and play is completely different, because I want what you want, I want for you what you want for me, and I genuinely mean that, and you genuinely mean that. And when we're playing with people who really have that divine masculine and divine feminine thing really balanced, and have really healed the mother wounding and the father wounding, there's wounding on all sides. However, when we've come across people that have really done that work and they've allowed themselves to drop into the womb, and sometimes you have tragic loss of life, so to speak, from the wombs, where we have to go into those dark nights and shed all of that and say, oh my goodness, that is not what I thought. It had such potential. We were so looking forward to 808. And unfortunately, not all life sustains itself outside of its embryonic environment. And sometimes we're in embryonic, petri dishes in an environment that this really isn't an embryonic field that's growing anything brand new. Nothing that's as sweet as a brand new baby. It's just growing brand new baby, parasitic, yucky, that just feels kind of gross, and it doesn't really, go forth and multiply except itself. So, if I like this, then I'm good with this. However, if I want to dip into something, a little more interesting to me, and I want to be able to trust men and women, equally, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, I want to be able to know and understand I have the criteria within me based on understanding my own divine energy of masculine and feminine, and how to move that out here as a woman who chooses primarily to act in her feminine aspects. However, let's not get it twisted. It'll need to get quite masculine in a second if, mommy need to get turned, because that's just the way things are. We need rules, and we need established guidelines and structure. However, we don't need oppression. We need guidance and how to stay within a structure and a system that works for everybody. And when the system genuinely works for everybody, which is that divine masculine, divine feminine, making sure it happens, when that system works for everyone, then everyone works for the system. However, that integration process right now isn't looking like it's going very well because we're not all on board with it. That's what's going on here. However, as the wheat and the chaff continue to separate and people don't want to play, on teams where everybody gets a piece of the pie, baby, there's a seat at the table for every single person. It's just, let's be honest, every single person isn't sitting at my table with me. My family has this table. However, every part of me is going to make sure that if I know you're there somewhere in the peripheral, I'll make sure 10-10 that you have a seat at a table somewhere. However, let's not make assumptions that just because there's generosity from people that we want to sit down with everybody. That is not true, because some people are just there to be the chaff that dresses up like wheat, talks sweet, and then it leaves you standing there with half your wheat. And after having those occasions, we have to figure out how to balance the masculine and the feminine so that we don't just brutally cut someone off and just slice their head off, and we also don't just roll over in what is a negative feminine aspect would be to just roll over and go, okay, I guess, submissive woman, like we know that we've seen. Well, how many men or gendered people, however they are, how many people, no matter what they're wearing in their pants or not wearing in their pants, how many people do you know have that very cowed and subjugated gaze and stance about themselves? 11:11. That is very typically coming from oppressed people. And divine feminine, that energy source, not necessarily women by any means anymore, not just women, and lives in everybody, because we all have the wounding. We all have the mother wound, the father wound. If you came into earth, you got the package of whatever the wounding is for everybody at bare minimum. You got the baseline package of that, and we'll start from there on what your specific mission or job is. However, the wounding itself, it can be dealt with by looking at it not just in some very far off way where we're going to try to scream it away, control it away, scare it away, bully it away, sweet talk it away, or addict it away, run away. None of those things work. Those are very action-oriented and action-oriented steps that take us into a wall. If we mean to go into a wall, that's exactly the great steps to take. And if we don't, well then, 12-12, it's really as simple as saying there's something wrong with my technique here, friend. And if we go with the other to just roll over and do nothing, then we've not accomplished anything there either. We've just rolled away from the problem in a more vulnerable and weak position. However, the person over here that rolled away from it didn't roll. They rolled out at like 900 miles an hour. They're still avoiding the problem and being equally as misunderstanding and lacking the wisdom to know that it means coming together within here to understand, where am I going to stand up for myself just a little bit more, have a bit of a backbone, stand up to a real tall line, not the tall line that somebody else told me, because I'm going to start looking and seeing what's the tall line of this man, woman, person in front of me. What is the tall line of this person? What are they showing me? What kind of activity are they presenting in front of me? How is their energy? Is it very forceful? That's a masculine trait, a male, thing, to be in an aggressive stance in action, that in an action of some kind. That is a masculine energy, and it's upside down. However, I can definitely come into my masculine downside any moment, can't you? And we can come into our downside masculine as women and then sound like these shrew screeching pterodactyl is what I used to call the women that screeched in my world. They sounded like whole pterodactyls because they're angry, bitter, rage-filled women that don't understand you have masculine wounding in you, and the mother wounding in you, the female wounding, the divine wounding in you, the feminine wounding in you, needs you to marry those two, because every man that you see, you hate them. However, you're going to find a way to bully them, push them around, and manipulate them, because that's what that wounding does as that particular gendered woman. And that particular gendered man will cow to it like a beaten down woman, divine feminine upside down. However, we've got the exact opposite of what those gendered people are actually doing. And it's the same wounding of its divine feminine was squished. The void was squished and pimped, period. And whatever you call that, this is the redistribution of those resources that were 1440 unrighteously and unrightfully taken and redistributed elsewhere, redistributed elsewhere. They're going to be reclaimed and returned to the rightful places. The wheat truly joining the wheat, the chaff truly joining the chaff, and allowing people to continue to choose and separate the quality of their life. You know, the quality of your life is there, it's fine, no problem. Quality of my life is over here, and I do this. And I call it this, however, you can call it this. I don't personally care. The fact that a person would care what ranking is, that tells me something, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. We no longer have time with broken people, broken hearts, broken minds, and broken banks and wallets. We no longer have time to be stuck in blaming and pointing fingers at who the dude is that's responsible, who the mean chick is, we're all responsible for the cleanup. That's really all that we need to know, is that we're all responsible for the cleanup because we live here, and as good stewards of the earth and as responsible stewards of, you know, our bodies and our environment, our literal home. Earth is our home. We live in a cardboard box that we call, you know, our home. However, our most natural indigenous home is the one that we were born onto. And if we were, you know, 1,000 years ago, it wouldn't have been quite as sterile or pretty, and we would have lived a very different life that probably would suit us better today if we'd stuck with that ideology. However, we didn't, so we need to do some balancing acts between the divine feminine and the divine masculine and get there a better relationship of collaboration and cooperation, so that we understand not a matriarchal leadership, not a patriarchal leadership, a balanced leadership, where leadership understands that it's a position, not a person. If it's relegated to a person most frequently, fabulous, hallelujah. However, believe me, as a leader, I like to be able to delegate. I'm the full top, you know, leader of my own stuff. Absolutely, I'll make all those decisions, and, you know, will consider options. However, I'm gonna make all those decisions, and I don't delegate out, you know, for real heavy duty personal decisions before I consider that first. However, delegating out other responsibilities as a leader means that I know I'm going to have to give lead responsibility to other people who are not going to do it like I do. They're not going to do it like me. And if I have 1717 as an 8-8, thank you. Wealth, frequency, and abundance, thank you very much for reminding me that if I have to have them do it a certain way, I'm not a leader, I'm a dictator. A leader allows someone, gives them the turfs the responsibility and says, look, this is your job now, and I'm letting this go. And we will talk about the standards of what this needs to meet. However, in our leadership and the group that I run with and that I work with, we are a group of people that we all lead different ways and in different areas. And we all literally lead groups in very different ways, and we have different responsibilities. And there are some days where this is going to need to be, you know, this person, they're running it, this is their thing, and we yield to that because that's the collaboration and the cooperation of understanding that's that person's specialty. And yet we're all trained. None of us are in competition with one another. We're all there supporting one another because that's the embodiment of divine masculine and divine feminine that understands we don't need to compete, you know, to compare, and we don't need to compare to be here. We need to just, you know, be here and show up as we are, because there is no competition, there is no comparison, and there's nothing except genuine experiences with people who want to, you know, experience something more about the quality of their life than worrying about the shame they feel, or, you know, the I'm not sure what's happening, the paranoia, etc. The wounding is huge. You know, the spiritual side of things is calling us, demanding us almost to see ourselves closely, and to reach inside and really nurture those parts of us with the best, most feminine aspect of us that we can find. If we're a woman, if we're a man, however we're gendered or identified makes absolutely no difference. Please take the opportunity to tell the inside of you that even though this may not all make sense, and even though you may or may not understand everything that's going on, none of us do. That's the first thing, none of us do. However, there is a divine mother and a divine father inside of you. And when you come inside, and you allow those presences to speak to you the way that no other human ever could do and never did do. They came as close as they could, perhaps, and maybe didn't even try. However, that was as close as they were going to get, unfortunately, and I'm sorry. So, what we need to do is, in all of those areas of deficit, is allow that healing to happen by balancing out and understanding where I've been, what I've been, where this has been, what it's been, and what I need here, friend, is my mom. And rarely is it my mom, as in my mom. For me personally, I realized all the times whenever I was growing up and as I was continuing to go through my life until I divorced a few years ago and then just divorced the whole life, I never realized that I was always just deeply connected in a very toxic way, very codependent way to my mom. And it was because I needed that mother nurturing from in here, because having it from out there wasn't happening. It never did happen. It never started to happen, which is why the perpetual chase for that with a woman that had the same affliction, the same problem, yet chose to grow up bitter, angry, and a black widow with it instead of choosing to look at a lighter side of things. She chose to dig into her deep, dark masculine side in an upside down way that is very, very nasty. It's very hateful, very toxic, and very jealous and competitive with other women in a way that makes it too difficult for children, 21, especially females, daughters of mothers like that. It makes it very difficult to understand the dynamic. However, that is a very common dynamic, in some form, diluted perhaps. However, that is a very common dynamic. It's very common for the man to be emasculated, to have very wounded, masculine energy from an out of balance feminine that, has really done them in out of the violence that was perpetrated on her, many, many, many generations ago, many karmic cycles ago. Now's the time. So, please reach inside and speak to those wounded places of you and allow Divine Feminine Mother to activate within you. Ask the Divine Presence that you surrender to or that you speak to help you embody, if you choose, the feelings of what it is to be nurtured, deeply held by Divine Mother, Divine Feminine, who holds that presence of life so tenderly, especially if that is not something that you genuinely received ever, that if you've never had anybody, to pick you up in the middle of the night when you were crying, if you did not have someone to help you when you fell and injured yourself and you were there learning how to, rub dirt on it and keep going, if you were out and about with no one really paying attention or really having any oversight of you, and somehow inside that this really isn't good, but I'm kind of liking it. If those are the kinds of experiences, for me personally, I was terrified a lot and I just ran in rabbit mode, searching for comfort, searching for that strong presence of Divine Mother and Divine Father that would be the strong protector as well as the nurturer, because I didn't have either. I had a strong dictator and a black widow. I wasn't sure 23, how I was going to change that to stay alive. And so, it's pretty amazing to grow up in that. However, now the retrospective analysis is that I understand the dynamics better, and I understand the intense need to be working on Divine Feminine right now for everybody, and to ease up the gas, on really finding a lot of that masculine upside down energy and charging and stuff. And where I see people doing that, or spending their time getting amped up and not solving problems, we're over playing with horses and solving problems and having fun doing it. So anyway, I hope that this is helpful for you in some way, and I hope that you enjoy your day no matter what part of the day you're in. And remember to get within your skin, because you're divine, masculine and feminine. Your God seed is so very, 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 very fine. There's no way that divine can be anything less than divine and sacred. And so for every single time your little girl, your little boy, your little person, every single time you, beautiful, precious you, had to sleep at night frightened with no one there to comfort you, please accept my genuine hug as a mom to say, I understand how it is that things go like that and how it feels to be there. And I hope that you will feel my genuine support, my genuine care, and a genuine hug from one mom to you, precious soul, to remind you you are a child of the universe and you absolutely have a place here. You are adored and loved. Welcome, little one. Welcome to this world. Let me take you by the hand and hug you deep. So, big love to all of you. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you again next time. Mwah. Thank you.